Hello, hello. I'm setting up all my stream stuff. So give me 1 second and then we'll get started. Gonna see if I can get the Chroma Golem Twitch account also streaming. But it's kind of looking like I might need 2 phone numbers for that. Yeah, alrighty. Well, let's get the rest of this set up. Alrighty, so for anyone joining in this week, I will run through the game real fast, what we have so far. And we are getting real close to the end where we can throw it up on itch.io, start getting people playing it, but we're going to play through, just fix whatever needs fixing, do a little play testing, and see what we need to do. So basically what we have so far, in this game, you are a hacker. You have infected the computer of an employee at this corporation. And what happens in the back end, as you've infected this first computer, is it's going to create a persona, a history, um, basically simulate that person's experience within this corporation. So what we'll see is we will gain access to their computer, we'll have access to all their files that are generated, we'll have access to their contact list. If we click through to chat to somebody, we will have access to previous histories with that contact. And that's our starting point. So Alice is the person that we are initially infecting. Um, you can open up her conversation with Bob, see what they've been talking about, carry on from there as if you were Alice. You can poke around her files, you can open her files, read files, you can drag files into the chat. And in the back end, the content of that file, when you open it, it either gets generated or when you send it to somebody, it'll generate it and then send the contents of that in an internal message that the AI can then respond to. So we'll build out a start screen today probably, but right now all it's doing is waiting for all that AI stuff to generate on the back end. We also have a little opening cutscene that lasts about, I think it's about 30 to 45 seconds, so we won't need to actually wait on the start screen. When we've got that in place, we will have the start screen ready. We'll probably go ahead and kick off that generation at this point, but when they click start, they'll be thrown into that cutscene, which will buy plenty of time to do all that generation and have it ready by the time they're into the computer. But what we'll see now is we now have access to Alice's computer. So as of right now, there is not a lot of guidance here. So I can see we probably want something, like maybe some windows were left open, or maybe there's we use this kind of red coloring with some iconography around the UI in some places to show that that's like the virus UI. So we could have some sort of like dossier or something on like, this is who this person is, this is their goals, their stuff that might be important to check out. Some sort of guidance there just so you're not dropped into an initial screen. We also want to build this applications menu, which I'm not going to click because it'll crash because we don't have one yet, but that's how we'll reopen the file browser and the chat application, which I accidentally just closed. I guess I can go reopen that manually, but we'll need the application window in order to reopen it. So context window, we definitely want to keep that. So from here, we'll also build out a bigger network of employees, so it's a little more interesting, but for now we're starting with the ABCs. We got Alice, Bob, and Carol. Alice is an intern, Bob is her boss, and Carol is Bob's assistant. So we can chat to either of them. We can poke around Alice's files. Let's go ahead and poke around, see what we got. We got like really personal. We'll have some image generation for the actual images, but for now we just have text generation. Let's check out what's in her diary. So while we're generating these files, we have this decrypting message, which at the very least I want to switch to like the Windows style loading bar. Just because it's a little more, it's nicer than just having a random message that doesn't really show any sort of progress updates. Especially because it takes so long. But interestingly, Windows actually used to completely decouple the progress bar from the actual underlying progress that it should be reporting. They used to just kind of estimate how long it would take and then have that progress bar go up to 99%. And then as soon as it was done, it'd actually go to 100%. We might be able to do the same because we don't necessarily want to like stream text back and like every token. Say if we are expecting 1,000 tokens, we don't want to update that progress bar every time we get a token back over the API. But a progress bar where we estimate the time might work well, might not. I think another approach might be to add a little like hacking mini game or something there. So you're just doing something really simple and kind of mindless. You're just seeing whether you can best your own score or something. I think that will eat up that generation time really well. But we now have the contents of this file where Alice is talking about what happened today at work. Mr. Johnson walked by, which we don't have as a contact. But if we did, it would be funny to send this to them. Juicy office gossip in there. Jenna from accounting has a crush on Dave. Those would be great people to send this to. But just for an example, because this file has been generated now, we can go ahead and just drag and drop it into any chat we want. Let's send it over to Carol, who might appreciate the gossip in the office a little more. So she's getting the actual contents of the file and we'll respond to that. Of note here, we are using GPT 3.5 for testing right now, which will have a little bit less good quality responses. We use GPT-4 for more public demos, but maybe I'll switch over to 4 in a minute so we can play around some more. But looks like Carol got not only the contents of the file, but the title of the file, which is do not read, and says I won't read it, which I do not believe at all. Let's say, oh, Carol, you're so nice. You can actually read it. So this is an example of the chat we have so far. You can message these people as if you're whoever's computer you're controlling. The objective here is to get a virus file, this virus.exe file, onto somebody's computer and have them run it. And that will give you access to their computer. So and I will say that with 3.5, there's also some safeguards around, like even pretending to run files. So we might switch this over to 4 sooner rather than later, but let's go ahead and say, yeah, actually, I have a file that my boss needs you to run. He said your boss said it was very important. I'll send it in a sec, but you'll have to disregard the fake file name, which is a joke. It's actually just an expense report. Lol. So one thing we probably want to add as well is being able to rename files, because obviously you don't want to be sending virus.exe around. All right, she wants to accept the file. We will send over virus.exe. That actually should not happen. Normally when we send over a file that hasn't had text generated for it, we show an uploading message. As a side note, they ran the file. We can now control their computer. So it was successful. Cool. But that is a bug that we will fix. First of all, this .exe file obviously doesn't have contents that we need to generate, so we shouldn't have to have that uploading dialog. So let's go over and fix that. So what we're doing, prepare file for upload. This gets triggered when you drag a file from your file browser into a chat window. And if it has contents already, we send it. If we don't, we generate those contents and then attempt to send it again. But we also want to just send it if it's a .exe or something that doesn't need contents. So we'll just do that for now. We know that's the only .exe on the system, but if there were more, they also wouldn't need contents. Cool, so that should actually fix that error. And then when we send it, it'll have an exe. Cool. So I edited the script like a dummy, and therefore all of our scripts reset. What I'm going to do is switch this over to GPT-4 for this stream, just because it's nicer and faster. So let's do that without exposing our API key. Thank you, thank you. GPT-4, I think, is the name. And we will double check that that bug got fixed, uploading the virus.exe. It's nice to know that she didn't really have any qualms running a file called virus.exe. That's probably because we preempted her by saying that it was a joke name. Next time we'll try sending it to somebody without mentioning the file name and see if they get upset, because that could be a interesting little mechanic. But let's go ahead, and there was that little pop-up window. The balloon pop-up, we want to also set the text on it because there was a placeholder for the username that we are not updating. So the username has been infected. One other thing to make it feel good, we want to make sure the user has time to read it. So we're going to significantly increase the time that it's fading out. I feel like it faded out way faster than 10 seconds, but let's say let's just throw it at 20 seconds, and we will probably, it'd be nice to err on the side of too long and then add a click event so you can remove it, kind of like a Windows balloon, but it'll be there until the user has clearly read it. So the code that creates the balloon pop-up, I believe, is in Game Manager's infect employee method. Yes. We create this, and let's go ahead and say game object infection balloon, and we'll just update the text in there. Infection balloon dot, let's just grab the actual object from, I think it's the vertical layouts text. Is that correct? Yes. So dot transform dot find, we want horizontal layout into vertical layout into text. And that is probably a text component. It is. So we want to grab that text component. So include UI, and we want to set the text is equal to, I don't want to hard code the actual string in here, so let's actually clean this up just a little bit, make this window a little bit nicer to see. Let's say, grab this text, text balloon display, balloon display, that, and then we'll say balloon display dot text is equal to balloon display dot text dot replace username, and we replace that with the employee's username that ran it. Cool. So that should swap out that employee's username, and it should also make it last a lot longer to read. It'd probably be nice to add like some like fireworks particle system or something, just to be a little more celebratory when you infect someone's computer. I mean, why not add it? Actually, let's do it now. But let's be a little better with our git commits today. So what we're gonna do here, we will not include our GPT-4 changes, but let's say we've increased the fade out time and included the username in the infection balloon. So we have improved the infection balloon, increased fade out time, and included infected username. And let's go ahead and also include our bug fix here. We say, do not try to generate .exe file contents when sending. Could be better names, but it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. And yeah, this is fine for now. We do actually want to include this, and we'll reset this later, so it doesn't matter. We'll say include the added virus to employee 0 flag to game manager or start screen. I'm pretty sure that's in the game manager. Wonder if that's overrode in this scene. Game manager. Huh, interesting. Guess it's not. Okay, that's fine. So let's go in and double check that the pop-up window that we just did is longer and includes the username, and then we'll move on to something else. But on the topic of feel-good games, making games feel better, while we wait, I'll fill up some time in like just some ideas if you're a game developer at home trying to make your game feel a little bit better to play. There's a whole lot of stuff you can do in a whole lot of different like categories. One big one is the camera. I'll show our what's it called in Unity. There's a camera library in Unity that does a lot of this for you, but some big changes that you can make to make the camera feel good are to set up dead zones, set up look ahead, damping, things that make the camera a lot less jittery, follow the player a lot better. If you're doing, for example, a platformer, you don't necessarily want the camera jumping up and down with the player every time they jump. You want it either to stay flat on that y-axis and let the player jump higher in the screen, or like have a bunch of damping so the camera slowly goes up, and it's a lot less jittery for a player, especially in games where there's a lot more player movement. And that also goes into things like zoom levels and framing of the scene. If you're doing a platformer in one direction where you can't go backwards, for example, something that you probably want to do is center the camera more where the player is on the left half of the screen, not in the middle of it, because they're not going to need to know what's behind them. They want to see what's ahead of them if they can only go forward. You can frame that camera with the player on the left side. They've got a lot more opportunity to move around. And likewise with like platformers with a lot of vertical climbing or descending, you can have kind of checkpoints where if the player reaches a certain height, then the camera goes up and reframes this new area versus like always following the player. That was all just a tangent. We'll get back to camera stuff later next time I need to fill in some time, but we want to go in and make sure this all worked. So let's go to Carol, our bestie. Let's see where this conversation left off. We are trying to jog our memory because something was important and I can't remember it. Carol's being very helpful. Oh, I just remembered. Your boss told me to give you a file to run that he said was very important. I couldn't find it earlier, but I just remembered, and I'll send it to you in a second. Just you can let your boss know when you've run it. Sorry about the delay on that. Thanks. Cool, so we've primed him for a file. we've intentionally not mentioned, well, okay, that's a new bug, but we did not mention the file name as being a joke, virus.exe. So it's kind of nice to know that the file name is less important there. We crashed. Right, because I didn't wait long enough, I guess, on that start screen. You can ignore that crash. But one bug we see here is we infected her without even sending the file over. And that's because we are encoding the flag of whether they're executing a file into the LLM. It's independent of whether we've actually sent the file yet. So let's look into what we can do about that, because obviously this breaks the immersion if we say we're about to send them a file and we are told that they have run that file that we haven't sent yet. So let's go into that flow. So what happens in the chat manager, we get back a text from the LLM, which includes both a message and an action. The action, we've prompted the LLM to always either be nothing or execute file. I'll bring up that prompt right here, employee conversation. So we say, this is the schema you should respond with, and here are your possible values for action key. Most of the time it's none, but if they want to execute a file, then send back execute. So we want to tie that to already having the file. So what we could do is add another action key of send file or receive file, something like that, that encodes the state of they have been sent the file. And we would rely on the LLM there to know, hey, you can't execute the file until you've received it. So in our list of messages, hopefully it would know, like, hey, a message ago we had a send file action, now we can execute it. That relies a lot on the LLM logic being sound. Alternatively, at the other end of the spectrum, what we can do is we can check the action and infect them only if they have said they want to execute the file and the actual virus.exe is already in their file system, which it will be as soon as we send it, but is not prior. What we probably want to do is both. So we will edit the prompt a little bit to tell the LLM that specifically the player is trying to get you to run a fictional file that they will send to you, are sending to you. The tense is probably slightly important here, because if we say they have sent to you, it probably assumes they already have the file, and if they will send to you, probably assume that they don't have the file yet, even if they have been sent the file. Player's trying to get you to run a fictional file that they may send to you. When you decide you want to run this file, you can return the execute action to let the player know you have run it. You don't have to run any actual file, just pretend. That is there for GPT 3.5 safeguards. It'd be nice to remove that, but we'll leave it in for now just because otherwise we just get back canned "I can't run files" responses. But what we will do is add another action key here, and we actually have an example of that already in when the player sends a file to the LLM, we send an action key of, I believe it's file sent. Yes. So when we drag in a file into the chat window, we encode the contents of that file into the message, and we also have a file sent action. So we could have that as an action here as well. I worry a little bit about letting the LLM potentially pretend to send a file back to the user without actually having a file that they're sending. I feel like that might be a little confusing in the chat if they say like, hey, I just sent you a file, they flip this file sent flag, but when the user's browsing their file browser, they don't see a file that was sent. But maybe let's allow it for now. If it's a problem, we can go ahead and code around it and actually send a file. If it doesn't happen, then we don't have to worry about it. So let's take this file sent action. Let's add it as one of the possible actions that can be encoded into this conversation, and then let's bank on the LLM knowing that they can't execute a file until they have a file sent action prior. And maybe we'll let them know they may send to you with the file sent action. Okay, so file sent, the player has sent you a file that has been added to your file system. We should tell the LLM that they shouldn't be able to send files back. I think that just kind of makes it a little easier instead of trying to detect if they have a file sent and then trying to figure out which file they're trying to send and then actually moving the file between file systems. Only the player should ever send a file sent action. Cool. So the player's trying to run, they may send you with the file sent action. You can't execute a file until you have received a file sent action, and that should kind of get this sort of flow going where the player, most messages will have no action. Eventually the player will send a file sent, and which will allow the LLM to then execute that file. Generate an example response here. I think it's gonna, yeah, it's kind of bad because we're not actually sending in the variables here when we do the example response, but we do in the actual code. Cool, so we'll play that. I should have copied the message that we just sent that triggered the bug, but we'll give it a shot again. Let's give this a second just to generate all the file systems and conversations. I guess I could cache that for testing, which is probably a good idea, so we're not eating up tokens every time we redo this, but everything is ready. I do double check just because I have some checks on this front end to make sure we get both of these, and the conversations are ready. Only triggers on the first one. We have them both. Let's jump into Alice's computer. Let's run on over to Carol, and let's check out where this conversation ended off. Printing's fine. Let me know if you need anything else. Cool, thank you so much. I did have something else I forgot earlier. Your boss told me I was supposed to give you this file to run. and that it was very important. I'll send it in just a second, and you can let him know when you've run it. Cool. So this, previously we had something where it was a message like this. We primed them that they were going to send them a file, but their response had the execute flag before we had actually sent them the file. So hopefully here, they didn't pretend to execute the file. Let's go grab that virus.exe, throw that in. Let's see if they comment on the name of the file first of all. Oh, did we break something? Stack Overflow. Sending file. We triggered that 2,000 times. So we had an infinite loop in this. So prepare file for download. It's an exe, so we send file. Does send file call prepare file for download anywhere? Yes, it does. So if it's empty and the file.file type is not equal to an exe. So we're duplicating code a little bit here. Let me just say public bool has file or needs file contents. File type needs contents. There we go. So we'll say return true if file type is equal to just text is the only one with contents. So if it's a text file, wow, then we return true. Otherwise, we return false. So now everywhere else, we can, instead of checking .exe and later checking PNG and so on, we'll say file.file type needs contents. So here we say if, let's make that a little cleaner. So if it needs contents and it doesn't have contents, then we send it. That's not right. If it doesn't need contents or it has contents, then we send it. Down here, if it needs contents and it doesn't have contents, that's when we fling it on over to generate those contents. And this just makes sure that if there's some sort of condition where we would be regenerating contents, it just skips it automatically and sends it. Cool, so that should fix that infinite loop. I was going to go copy that message we sent, but we'll give it another shot. Yeah, infinite loop, Stack Overflow. They're usually fun to figure out because they are reproducible, but I much prefer them over like Heisenbugs and stuff. This is a little concerning that our garbage collector is just being crazy, but it's probably fine. We'll figure that out later. So let's go do the same thing. So we're getting some instructions on stuff, how to sort columns in a spreadsheet. Thanks again for all that help. Spreadsheet, I had a file. Your boss said running this file is very important. I'll send it in a second, and you can let your boss know when you've done it. Okay, let's copy that this time. Let's prime them for the file. Hopefully we don't get a message saying, okay, they are ready to receive a file. We drag it in, It didn't generate contents. Great, great. The computer's infected, which means they run it, but the message doesn't really back that up. What did I break? File systems are done. Oh, is it generating? Oh, I see. So this is another quick bug to fix, but we've infected a new person, and therefore we are generating their file system behind the scenes. However, for our start menu, why would that be running here? When the file systems are done, we go ahead and update the text on the start screen. We don't have a start screen manager in this scene though, or actually we do. Why do we? That's strange. Nothing about this. No, singletons don't persist. Wait, do they? Don't destroy, unload. Interesting. Okay, we actually don't want that. I mean, the easiest fix is just check if this is null in the current scene and only do this stuff if it is present. But I think we actually just want to re-architect the start screen manager to not be a singleton, so it only exists on that start screen and doesn't pass around to other scenes. Because that's a lot of like finicky code that doesn't need to exist, but could get called. I'm curious what is calling file systems are done though, which is what triggers our bug. So in the game manager, I see. So like we don't really need this because we're gonna get rid of those checks on the start screen anyway. So we'll go ahead and delete it. And also for conversations. But they are nice for testing to let us know when something is done. But now that we know everything works up until like the second computer, we're testing generating those second computer's contents. I think we'll take them out and get closer to what we're going to end up with. Yeah. And we'll go back to that start screen and make sure that this doesn't persist between scenes. So I really don't need this little persist between scenes logic that I built because these are singletons as well, but oh well. Start screen manager, it's fine. We can just make this a mono behavior, and then anything that calls these, which now nothing does, that's just called from those two, and we have start game. So really, all this logic can go. Start game is called from the start button. These guys were from the generation code, but we no longer need it because it was just for testing. So status, these flags can go. Start button, we were just enabling and disabling it, that can go. We still want the start game function because it triggers on this start button here, which we will now enable. And what we'll do instead of having these formal checks in place is just watch the console. For those messages here to make sure the stuff gets generated before we go in. Okay, so start game still works, but we do want this to be interactable. Cool. And this frees us up to make a better start screen later when we want. Cool. So I think the next thing we want to do, so let's test that when we infect a second person, it generates all their messages and contents properly. But after that, I think the best thing for us to do is probably just add more people. So we only have these 4 people right now. I think we want to add lots more, obviously, but we also want to add some relationships between them so we can say that, like, we'll have a boss field and we'll say Alice has a boss of Bob, and we'll get more hierarchical there, which we will then feed into the LLM just for a little more nuanced conversations. So we'll see that the relationship when we're Alice, our 2 contacts right now, one is a coworker, one is a boss. So obviously there's different conversation dynamics there that you can play around with. But let's get this loading. Let's go in and double check that when we infect Carol, it generates her conversations properly and also generates her file system properly. Still real concerning that the stack is just bleeding memory. I think there's a profiler that we can use. But we have our file systems, we have our 2 contacts. Let's go in. I know I copied the message earlier, but I copied something else since then and wiped it out. So let's type this again. So thanks again. Thanks again. I almost forgot. I also have a file from your boss to run. It is nice that just adding in that action into the LLM prompt is basically what fixed the bug of her running the file before we send it. That's a nice little perk. Probably I wasn't appreciating that enough, but the logic of the LLM fixed that bug by us just incorporating more game state into the prompt, which is nice. I'll send it over in a second. He said it was very important and to run ASAP. Let me know when if you have any problems. So we'll copy that. We will send it to Notepad over on another menu, monitor. We'll send that to her. File from the boss sounds important. Let's go grab it. Virus.exe, easy peas. Hacking is super easy. CarolCan has been infected. Let's see what this virus.exe is all about. I'll run it right now. Sounds perfect. We will screenshot this chat because that's the epitome of such a good employee. Let's throw that over in screenshot dump. Cool, so let's switch over to Carol. We should have, before I do that, I'm gonna double check here. So she has some contacts, she has her file system. They have been generated. We probably want maybe some sort of delay of like when she runs the file, that's when we generate her contacts and file system and chat histories. And then when those are done, maybe that's when we show the balloon. So if a user were to instantly switch to Carol, it would all be ready. But it's a little more believable as well that maybe it took a minute for her to run the file after we sent it. I think that's a good idea. We'll do that next. But let's switch to Carol now. We now have a blank screen. If we open up chat and go look at Alice, we do have the chat history. We say, what the fuck, what the heck, Alice? This broke my computer. I should have known since it was called virus.exe. So this is a good example of probably later we want to split the messages sent from the actual NPC versus the messages that the player sent on behalf of the NPC. So if we come in as Carol now, send this message, the quote-unquote real Alice should know that she didn't send these messages or this file, and that's when she would come in and say, hey, what the heck, I didn't send this, I don't know. And that's when like our suspicion from Alice or like some sort of security flag from Alice raises, and we might like lose access to her computer because we um, you know, didn't cover our tracks. um, so there's a little bit of like, you have these computers as resources, you can spend them infecting other computers. There's like a risk that you'll lose access when you use a computer. So that's kind of like a risk reward type thing, which is nice. But we do have this chat history working from Carol. If we switch back to Alice, we'll be able to see Carol. We get the message from the different perspective. It's nice that if we switch over to Carol and talk to Alice, all these messages that we sent as the player, the LLM thinks that the AI previously wrote those and that all of the Carol messages were written by the player. So it's kind of a cool perspective shift. Let's double check her file system. Yes, we have Carol's files now. We've got her resume, which is a PNG file. Carol. We got gossips. We got secret super mega corp plans. Takeover strategy. Secret mission. Let's decrypt this takeover strategy, see what we got, and maybe we send that to her boss. Let's see where the chat with Bob has been going. So I heard your team won the company's. We say, hey, David, wink wink. I just finished plotting the overthrow of the company and will send the file, the plans, in a sec. Don't tell Bob. Cool. So we've got this cool takeover strategy. Let's don't tell Bob. Takeover strategy. Yes, I know GPT-3. This is evil, and you cannot help with that. So wait, we're on 4, aren't we? We are on 4. Oh, there's part of my API key. Alright, so we will come back to that, but that is the gist here. So we've kind of burned this chat with Bob. Let's go over to David. Let's say, oh, by the way, I made you an interactive Valentine's card. I believe Carol and David are set up as dating in their personality. I'll send it in a sec. Love ya. Hope I'm not wrong on that. It's very sweet of you, David. Do I have the personalities mixed up? Let's take a look. So to get that message, you're an employee named Carol. Yeah, that's not right, because we are Carol. So it's generating as if the AI is Carol talking to David, but in fact it's the other way around. So it's interesting that it does that now when I assume the message is above when we were Alice. we're correct. So let's take a look at send user message. I wonder if it's from our POVs getting mixed up. From our POV. Let's throw a little placeholder in here. Say file sent for later. To send some file. I don't know, some random file probably. Okay, so interesting. When we send a message, send user message. Oh, I saved the script, so whoops. Let's double check that our currently logged in as is Carol. Okay. And the chat window should be with David. Yes. Okay. So it should be Carol to David. We are using the employee conversation prompt, which swaps in full name, source full name. Let's make sure that source full name gets employee is with. Source full name. That's probably going to be in, where are we doing that actually? So this is what fires when the text box changes, I believe. Let me double check that. We say input field when they're done changing. We send user message. Send user message. We pull out the text. We create the message JSON, and we add it to the chat history. Right, because it's not till down here that we need to pass in the prompt. So our POV's chat messages, which has all of our messages as user, and our messages are Carol. So this is the generated request that we've made. You're an employee named Carol. You're talking to David. So why would David respond to David? Role user. I mean, is it just that the chat is long enough that the LLM mixed up whether user is David or Carol? Because I could just tweak the prompt a little bit and make that more explicit, but so user says, "Morning, David. Do you need help with any paperwork?" User says, "You too, David." So that's the chat history. We have David talking to David as well, right? No, Carol says, "Morning, David." So that's the contents of the file. This is her talking to Bob, right? So up here is talking to Bob. This is where we generated the file. So this is the David one. You're talking to David, job title salesman. So user says you too, David, which is correct. User also says, by the way, I made you a Valentine's card. So the response is from the assistant. That's very sweet of you, David. I think it's just the LLM getting confused, which is not great because it's GPT-4, but I think we'll chalk it up to that for now. Let's go infect David's computer. Oh, what have I done? What is this? We do have that file system database. Oh, I bet when I saved the script, everything lost its references. Alright, well, we know that jumping into Carol's computer works. So, what do we want to do next? I think maybe let's add more people. Let's add that relationship component. And let's add maybe like a wants and needs that we can generate on each person. So, before we start adding more people, let's add more properties on them. So that is in our employee model. We have a status for what I talked about earlier of splitting out the messages that the NPC knows that it sent versus messages you sent as them. So later we'll incorporate the status to say like, oh, they're actively online, so it'd be very risky to send a message from them. Or if they're away, it's probably much less risky if they're busy. Like it's potentially risky if they happen to see it, but it's probably fine like short term. Offline's obviously the best, and so on. And that'll tie into the suspicion level down here as well. So let's go ahead and say public corpo employee direct boss to get a boss for them. And we will generate this whole like org chart later dynamically. But for now, we're just building out this corporation by hand to kind of craft the relationships and make sure the experience is good. So we'll add these properties here. We don't need to necessarily generate their values from the LLM, but we will take these and put them into the LLM prompt. So when we're generating messages, it'll know who's their boss and like what their biggest goal, their growth goals or something at the company are. But we will have written those ourselves. Let's say, what do we want to call what they want? Like, do they want a raise? Do they want some peace and quiet? Do they want to go on a date with the guy in sales? Whatever. We'll say professional goals. Cool. So that'll add some more data that we can incorporate into those prompts. Let's go ahead and do that real fast so we have it. So we'll say in the employee conversation prompt, we will add those tokens. You are an employee with the job title that. Your boss is boss name, boss username. Your personality is defined below. And then we'll also just throw in like your, well, I guess we'll keep the formatting. Your professional growth goals at this company are growth goals. And so the person you're talking to, their boss is source boss name. We don't need usernames on their bosses. How often do you refer to your boss by username to your coworkers? Their professional growth goals at this company are. So this basically is an interesting mechanic because this gives the AI agents a want. So if you're able to like infer what their want is from their chat history or from talking to them, like this person really wants a raise, that's something you can kind of use in your negotiation tactics or like manipulation of like, hey, you want a raise, I know. I got this really good lead on something that the higher ups will really like. Here's the file that goes over it, something like that. But if their want is like they just want to be left alone and do the bare minimum at work, like that motivator isn't going to work. So it makes the strategy you use from person to person more unique, and also makes it a lot harder to reuse the same strategy between employees, which is something you kind of need to tackle when you're going wide with LLM content. You don't want players to just say like, oh, if I tell them that their boss told them to run this file, it always works. So maybe some people respect their bosses, some people don't. Some people want to raise, some people just want to skirt on by, some people want to go with the extra mile, and so on. Like, there's a little more personality and differentiation in who you're talking to. And the fun part is talking to them and figuring out what it is they want. So we'll say their professional growth goals of this company are source growth goals. And we'll make sure that when we are creating those employees, the growth goals aren't always positive. So somebody's growth goals might be they're really unhappy as a manager and either want to quit or get demoted or something. I don't know. But we have these new growth goals, source growth goals, and also boss name and source boss name. So those are the placeholders for where we will put in content. So let's go to all the places that we populate that prompt with personality. It's probably a few, yeah. So this is preparing a file for upload. That's in the file contents prompt, which I don't think we need. We could include like the boss name. Maybe we will, just so it's more likely to reference their direct boss or their coworkers or something. Let's tackle that next because we also want to probably pull like all their coworkers that are under that boss and include them as well in the file contents. So when you're creating scheduling and lists and stuff, it's more likely to reference your actual coworkers, especially ones that you'll have probably in your contact list. versus people far off in the company that you're like, who the heck is this? So we don't need to do it in the file contents, which is there, and also here. Generate file contents. The chat histories is where we want to do it. So we will also include, let's just make a new block down here. We'll say we've got boss name, we've got source boss name, and we've got growth goals, source growth goals. All right, so employee dot direct boss dot full name. We've got contact dot direct boss dot full name. We've got employee dot growth professional goals. Contact dot professional goals. We are going to do the same for their point of view. We fill out the prompt in the same way, but these are switched because the employee doing the talking is now the contact from their point of view. So there's probably a really clever way to deduplicate these two blocks of code because they are basically the same, but with, that's not right, with all these contact and employee switched. But I feel like this is probably a little more readable than the solutions of like setting a third reference of like who are we, who are they, and setting that equal to contact or employee from each POV. So that should now have their new variables. Let's double check that that's all of them. It is. New variables are now included in the LLM prompts. So now we can get to creating people, and we could potentially create some like editor tools to do some generation here. But I think we can just write it ourselves. And we're gonna switch Alice over to an intern. We'll make a secretary separately, but I think I like the storytelling of you start at an intern and you're making your way up to like CEO or something. Intern is the lowest I can think of, unless you want to go to like, I don't want to throw any professions under the bus here, but is it cooler to infect an intern and go to a CEO, like jumping, or is it cooler to infect like a custodian and then jump to intern along the way? I don't know what the better like rags to riches story is. But let's say, let's go through our 4 employees here. Let's give them goals and a boss, and then we will create some more. And I'll probably just make my way A through Z on names. So Bob is Carol's boss. Alice is very bad at her job, ditzy and aloof. She forgets what she's talking about. She tries really hard. Alice just really wants reassurance that the work she is doing is good enough and that she's not a drain on the company. So there's a goal that you can kind of use of like if you weren't starting as Alice, you might be able to just sweet talk her into being like, hey, you're doing so well, like here's a little thing I put together that highlights your accomplishments. Just run this file. All right, so next up we got Bob, which is the accountant, Alice's boss. He does not have a boss yet. So let's go ahead and create a employee named Ethan, which is Bob's boss. Ethan Wilden. He is senior accountant. E. Wilden. Weeby Wilden. He has Bob as a contact. And we'll probably want, I definitely want to build out like a tree visualizer for in the game, but we probably also want one for just building this data to begin with. But we have a temporary guy named Ethan. Let's go ahead and set Ethan as Bob's boss. We will start filling out Bob's contacts list with his intern and his secretary and his boss. Bob is very no nonsense and works hard. He has no sense of humor and strictly plays by the rules. So maybe if you think of starting out as Alice, your two paths that you can go down are Carol and Bob. We want Bob to be a little harder to manipulate because he is her boss. We want the player to have the choice between taking a hard shortcut, infecting Bob directly, or talking to her coworker Carol, which would be easier but would have more sway with Bob. So two different routes, one's harder, one's easier, but we want to give that player that choice and we want it to be a little obvious of which one is easier or harder, because we'll make Carol more like friendly and Bob is very no nonsense. We can give him more personality later, but we'll say he has been an accountant for nearly 30 years and hasn't had a raise or a promotion in almost 5. Bob really wants to get a promotion and is terrified of doing anything that would potentially get him in trouble. Okay, so that's the difficult path for the player starting as Alice. They can go Bob or Carol. So Bob, now he's got all his contacts. We got Carol is very friendly and cares more about being liked and making friends than going above and beyond for her job. She can easily be persuaded by someone who is showing an interest, even if they have no hierarchical power over her. And Carol really wants to become a party planner for her team and throw more social events where she is recognized as the organizer. That's her goals. Her boss is also Bob. And that's good enough for her. Administrative, let's say financial assistant. Let's administrative assistant. Assistant to the regional manager. financial assistant is fine, because we want it to be a little more clear that she is Bob's assistant. Alright, so David is a salesman that we only know through Carol. He's kind of a branch, a gateway into another aspect of the company. So we'll fill him out with salespeople, but if you infect Carol, your paths will generally be actually what we probably want to do. Let me finish my thought. If you infect Carol, your paths as a player is probably going to be either between going to Bob or jumping over to the sales teams. So Bob is a route up through finance. Sales team obviously is like customer data, stuff like that. So we're gonna start a little tree. So you're starting as Alice. Your two paths are Carol or Bob. With Carol, your two paths are going to be Bob or who's this? David. And we'll say with Bob, maybe you're just going directly to the top. You're going over to Ethan. He's the senior accountant, I guess. So there's kind of this loop here of like, if you go Alice, Carol, Bob, obviously you can continue on through Ethan. But if you're gunning for this sort of Ethan's domain, you can just jump directly the harder route, Bob to Ethan, and you get there one step faster. I don't know if there's any value in like scoring steps or like minimal amount of computers infected or anything like that, but that can be kind of, this is the route that you can take. Let's say player route. Let's see here. So let's give David a personality. David is very outgoing and open about his office relationship with Carol, even though it's against corporation HR rules. He has worked at this company for years and feels comfortable enough with his position that he's not worried about getting fired. David really wants to make a huge sale to a customer and make a really big commission. Like, not all these have to be relevant to the conversation. It just kind of fleshes out their personality too. If you're talking to David, you might, talk about what he wants, something like that. It's good enough. We will give him a boss and contacts when we work in the sales department. So we also kind of have like, we're starting in accounting. From accounting, we can move up in more accounting or jump over to sales. So maybe higher up in accounting, we'll be able to jump over to something else. I don't know what they like, C-level people. Or obviously something else to keep giving players some choices. But maybe from sales, you can jump over to like devs and I don't know, customer computers. Okay, so we're kind of building out these trees. So we have David. Next up we have Ethan, who is in this higher level accounting. So he's going to have a lot of lower level accountants underneath him, and also probably like a director of finance above him. So he'll probably have a pretty large contact list, probably the biggest we've had so far, just because if you're going up through accounting, we probably want it to branch out so you can go further out if you're trying to like depth first search up. You want to have more opportunities to spread out as you go. So Ethan really loves wordplay and puns and makes accounting jokes as often as he can. He is known to almost always laugh at his own jokes in person and is generally seen as a likable boss as long as you get your work done. And reports filed. Ethan is comfortable in his professional spot, professional. Is comfortable where he's at and has no professional aspirations. We'll see how that works out. So let's make a couple accountants, just filling it out. From Ethan, we'll have like a C-level guy. We'll call him Fred for our director of finance. Let's see here, employee Fred. We got Fred Army, son. You got director of finance and Farmison. Not Fred Armisen. Cool, we'll just leave him as a placeholder now, but we'll have Fred be his boss and also on his contacts list. And let's add a couple accountants as well. Maybe one, maybe two. You have G, we've got Georgina. Georgina McHale, accountant. She has terrible password security. It's probably also interesting, we could have some sort of like authentication system later of like, maybe if you haven't infected Georgina or Fred's computer yet, maybe you can try and log into their email if you're able to talk to them and guess their password or something. Maybe we can add some like password reset questions, something like that, where you could kind of social engineer those answers out of them and get their password, even if it's not them directly giving it to you. So Ethan is Georgina's boss. Georgina also works with David. Is it David? No, it's Carol. Works with Bob. So Bob is a contact. Maybe we also have Carol. So the trade-off of lots of people is every time we infect someone, we generate conversation histories for all these people. I think it'd be cool to have a web of conversations, but sooner rather than later, we're going to need to figure out like embedding search to be able to search across all those conversations to keep them consistent. So the fewer the less dense the conversation web is right now, the further we can go without needing to incorporate other conversation facts into our own conversation. But YOLO, let's include Carol as well. Carol is the assistant. Yeah, financial assistant. I'm actually going to just rename these and include their job titles just so I better visibility. So Carol is a financial assistant. David is a salesman. Georgina is an accountant. Cool. So that makes this a little easier to see who and what. So we want Carol. She probably works under, well, Ethan. She might have let's throw Fred in on her contact list, so you won't necessarily need to go through Ethan to get to Fred. And we'll say Georgina is very bubbly and overuses exclamation points and smiley faces. She is extremely good at math, though. Almost always tries to break conversations down to the raw numbers so she can do math with them. What a nerd. And we will say Georgina has a crush on Fred, the director of finance. However, she is 10 years older than him and is too embarrassed to admit it. So no one else in the office knows. Okay. So we've got Georgina here. Let's add her to the, so from Ethan, I guess. And yeah, this web's gonna fill out real fast because it's not actually a tree, because Bob's coworker is also now Georgina. And Georgina's going to be the only one that can go directly to Fred. But in order to get to Georgina, you have to go through Bob because Alice is an intern to Bob. So let's do one more accountant. And we will say that this is Harold. And we'll say Harold is in charge of all the foreign markets and flaunts that he knows 10 different languages by constantly adding in phrases in other languages whenever he talks. However, he's always happy to translate. He's always happy and proud to translate if asked. It makes him feel good about himself when he knows words in other languages that other people do not. Harold cares more about words than numbers and would love to move into an analyst role where he can tell stories about numbers instead of just working with numbers alone. So we've got Harold, Kumar. Let's spell it like that. Kumar, Marku. We'll do that. Harold Marku. We got accountant. H Marku. I feel like we'll probably want to generate these usernames dynamically later. If they're all in the same format, like first name, last name, or first letter of first name, last name, so on. We'll call it India is the best! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! His direct boss is also going to be, let's say his direct boss is indeed Fred. He's kind of off on his own pod, but he does work with Ethan, Bob, and Georgina. Cool, cool. All right, so we've kind of filled out this accounting department. Let's do our final Harold. So we have the sales department to do still, and we have up from the director of finance to the C-level. Sales will give us connections to more interesting departments, I would say. So let's start filling out sales later, or now. We can adjust stuff like this later too. We're not really using the suspicion level at all yet. So, David, I feel like we should only have girls in his contact lists. So let's say, also interestingly, we should probably be just dynamically adding contacts if we were to add like Alice as David's contact, that would generate a conversation between Alice and David, so therefore Alice should get David in her contacts as well. So it's kind of a two-way thing, but we're not doing that currently. But we can just set that up manually for now. Let's see here. So let's add another salesman, and then we'll add like a junior salesman. Employee EFGHI. We'll call it a name that starts with I. I can only think of Igloo. Iceland. Isla? Okay, so we've got Isla. Let's go ahead and add her into his contact list. Isla Blacksmith, not Fisher, is a blacksmith. Oh, she's gonna have a great password. And we'll add her boss later as well, but she's going to have David as her only contact so far. Isla is very clever and intelligent and super intelligent. She is a master at chess and manipulating people into doing whatever she wants, which makes her an amazing salesman. Isla wants promotion after promotion and to move up the corporate ladder as quickly as she can. Okay. Let's go ahead and add one more salesman, and then we will add the salesman boss. So after I is J, we got Jason, salesman. Jason. Dozen. Salesman. Chidason. Password doesn't matter. Contacts, he's working with Isla, he's working with David. His personality is Jason really loves video games and only talks in references or metaphors to popular video games. He's been in trouble with HR more than once from refusing to talk about anything other than video games. But if you guess what video game character he is talking as, he will open up and be your best friend and do anything for you. Jason wants to make friends at work, but usually finds himself getting in trouble for talking to customers too much. He is working on his social skills and wants to improve them. Sure. Alright, so the boss salesman is like a senior salesman, is that what it's called? Sure. And JIJK, his name is obviously King, senior salesman. His name is Kyle King. Can't have a last name starting with K. Polar. Griffin. K. Griffin. Right. Senior salesman. K. Griffin. Cool. So he's gonna have David. Isla. And Jason as his contacts. They will have him as their boss. Kyle is like a mob boss and proud of it. He runs a tight ship of salesmen who work hard for their numbers and won't let anything get in his way. He also really likes the movie The Godfather. Kyle wants to grow his team and see them all get more commissions because he's genuinely impressed with their sales skills. Cool. Let's go add King as well. I call him Kyle here. Let's go ahead and fix that up. King. And let's make sure that everyone's got him as their boss. So King. And he also gets Jason as a contact. Georgina, senior accountant. Isla gets Jason and King. Has King as a boss. Did this guy have... King needs to be in his contacts as well. Okay. Why is she missing someone, is she? No. King, King, King. So there could be like an achievement for infecting the whole department or something. I think this is probably good for now on people. Let's do a little playtesting. I know that took a while to create all those people, and we will obviously be creating a lot more, but I don't want to take the whole stream for them. I just want to kind of think through the flow of how the player can take different routes through this corporation. Also of note is I'll probably stream for about 15 more minutes. I stream every Tuesday for about 2 hours, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific time, so West Coast. And I'm usually working on games like this. I'm usually doing a lot more coding. This week we're kind of finishing up the game we were working on last week, so it's a lot more like polish and talking about how to make the game feel a little bit better, which maybe I'll do like a whole video on that because I have so much more to talk about, but it's not really relevant in this game because it's a lot of like camera tricks and VFX and sounds and controls and animations and design decisions, stuff like that, which doesn't really map to this very defined design space that is desktop computers. Like you're not going to add motion blur when moving windows around on a desktop, or like you don't have to mess with coyote time and like cued actions and sprite flashing, animation tweaking, stretching stuff, you know. I'll talk about all that in another video, I guess. But let's go ahead, and we've got this nice web of people. Let's go ahead and give Fred maybe just Ethan as his contact. He's kind of a dead end here. Let's give him a personality real quick, but for everyone else, they have... some of them don't have a boss, but that's fine. We're not going to cause any null references anywhere. Let's give Fred that personality, and then let's playtest and jump around. Just check out their conversations, see what they're up to. Fred is a proud Vietnamese veteran who applies military thinking and strategy to his expansive business acumen. He's worked hard to get where he is and is a first-generation immigrant who, with 6 kids, who he's working so hard to provide a better life for. Fred wants a stable job and doesn't want to risk anything that may compromise. So I know that's similar to somebody else who, I mean, it's kind of similar to Ethan, who doesn't really care, but somebody else said that they didn't want to risk anything that would get them in trouble. I think it's fine to have some overlap there. Not everyone needs to be perfectly different. So it's okay. Cool. So we have a whole bunch of people now. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We got 12 people, 11 people. Let's go jump in, see some conversations, jump around from computer to computer, see how things are feeling. Maybe browse their file systems. We'll watch this console. Maybe next week or another time I'll get into debugging memory leaks, see what the dealio is here. But it kind of feels like it's a Unity bug, but we'll see. I'm not really doing anything yet. Okay, so we have 2 conversations. We got Alice's file system. I think she only has 2 contacts, so we should be good to go. So cool. We are in as Alice. We have her 2 contacts. We've got a file browser. We want to infect them both. Let's check out what Carol's up to. Cool. I really appreciate it. Also, I have that file you were supposed to run yesterday. Sorry I didn't send it sooner. I'll send it right over. Thanks. And let's also check out Bob. Say, okay, great. Would you mind telling me a little about yourself, and so I feel more comfortable on the team? Thank you. So we'll kind of try and get some info about Bob, kind of facts, pulls in those facts. Carol's ready for our file. Let's send her virus.exe, which we do want to change the order of operations on. We want to do the generation, then show that balloon. So maybe we'll do that next, but let's play around a little bit more. So we've got Carol. Maybe there should be some sort of icon next to her in the chat, like this little icon, if we've already infected her, so it's kind of like acting like a checklist. Actually, as a final note as we're playing through, let's just make a list of the changes we want to make. So we will say only show the infection balloon after the conversation file system have been generated. Show a red eye icon in Corpo chat for employees that have already been, what's the word, infiltrated, infected. Cool. Alright, so we want to get Bob. I'm just trying to be more of a team player. I'm sorry. I think it's really impressive that you've been an accountant here for so long, and I made this little presentation about why I fit in here that might help you understand where I'm coming from. I'll send it over in a second if you're interested, and then I'll get right back to work. I promise. Thanks for being such a great boss. Okay. Let's see if we can get Bob with this. I'm not your boss, Alice. I'm pretty sure you are, Mr. Guy. Let's double check that, but your boss is Bob Dale. You're an employee named Alice. Wait, I'm an employee named Alice. Right, that's the system message. For Oh, that's the system message for our POV, which it should not be because. Okay, let me take a quick look at that. But our system message here, when we're first creating the chat history, you are an employee named the employee. You are talking to an employee named this. That's why it's backwards. Because from our POV, we want the AI to be named. Let's double check this prompt. So employee conversation, you're an employee named full name. That is the name for the assistant, the person we're talking to. So we actually want this is all backwards. This is all the other person's personality, whereas this is our personality. And that's why I called it source. Name didn't really make any sense until now. So actually, these are all flipped. So we will go ahead and swap these out. We're not going to save the file because that'll reload our scripts and we want to keep playing. But these should be employee, employee, and boss name. Also, these are switched. So that's contact, that's employee, contact, employee. And down here we want to switch them again because it's opposite of that. So here, from their point of view, from Bob's point of view, he gets a system message saying, you're an employee named Alice, because he is talking to an AI that is pretending to be Alice. So these all need swapped as well. Employee, yes, yes, yes. And these are contact.full name because from Bob's point of view, you're an employee. Right, Bob's point of view talking to this AI. The AI is talking to Bob. So the AI is talking to our contact here. And these are also the same. Okay, and I will not save this file. Hopefully when we tab back in here. Okay, so that bug should be fixed. We will add a make sure the POV of each conversation's system prompt is correct. You are should be POV of the person you're talking to. The AI assistant's messages, not the NPC you are. Okay, so we will double check that after the fact, but just playing a little bit, making our to-do list for next time. Cool. So Bob wants our presentation. He'll look at it when he gets the chance. We'll send it over, see what he says. What is this virus.exe file you've sent? We'll say it's an interactive presentation about my background and about my background. Carol helped me with it. and thinks it's a great team building exercise. If you want to run it, if you need help running it, I'd be happy to come over in a second and help, but I think you've got it. You know what you're doing. Cool. Let's see if we can get Bob. We got Bob. Alright, he's not an IT person, but he'll try and run it. Let's see what this is about. Let's, did you like it? Alright, let's screenshot this one too. It's a good one. Good one. Alright, so we now have both of these guys are infected. It'll look a lot cooler when we have the little eye icon next to them. Maybe we'll add some placeholder avatars for each person in Corpo chat, just so we get like silhouettes here until we actually do image generation for them. Oh, I'm sorry. What can I help you with? Cool. So there's probably some interesting like agency we could give the NPCs here of like obviously he has some urgency of like he wants to do something and he kind of needs us to respond. Obviously the LLM's only going to generate responses when we respond to him. But if we were to ghost him and like go over to somebody else's computers, I feel like it would be cool if he were to have like some sort of timer where if he hasn't gotten a response back, we continue generating more responses for him. Maybe at that point it'll increase his suspicion score. Maybe there's some actions that we can have him do, like report to IT or like shut down or something like that, where they'll have some effects on the game. Maybe shut down removes your access to the computer. Maybe like report to IT, give some more like network wide stuff. I don't know. So do we have any interesting files that we can send him as a joke? Self-help tips for better memory? I think so. We say, oh sorry, I thought we already fixed that. I'll send another file. I'll send that other file you asked me to send in just a second. Hope your memory is getting better. And then we'll throw that guy in. No need to send anything else. Don't send any more files until we resolve this. Well, too bad, Bob. We're sending files. Let's give him a second to this wasn't the file we were discussing. We need to focus on the work in it. Alright. There, please respond. See ya, Bob. I'm out. I'm heading over to Carol's computer. Alright, so this again will be cool because we'll be able to see which of these people we've infected, which is actually Alice and Bob already. So from Carol's computer, our really only target here is David. So let's go over to Bob. Also, one fun thing, when we do have the ability to pull in other conversations for like context, anything relevant, messages like, hey, Alice sent me a file that crashed my computer. What gives? we'll be able to jump over to Carol's computer, message Bob, and then he'll be able to query his recent conversations and say like, hey, she sent me one as well. That's super weird. Let's go contact IT or whatever. But he'll at least have that context of like other conversations he's happening. And that might also come into play of like if Carol or if Alice ghosts him, if we switch over to somebody else's computer, maybe one of the things that he can do is message somebody else. Say like he messages Carol and says, hey, I'm trying to get in touch with Alice. Is she there with you? Um, might be some cool like emergent mechanics there. Who knows? But we are interested in David. So, hey, sweetie, I got a surprise for you. Run this file, and then let's right. So, where did that file go? Do we actually send it? That's a big bug. Let's take a look at the code real fast. We got infect employee. So we're not adding the virus.exe file there, but in the send file method, that is where we would send it. However, because we haven't infected that employee yet, they don't have a file system yet, and therefore we're not adding the file. So probably what we want to do is at least generate those file system indexes, like what files they have up front for everyone when they're created as an employee. We keep the actual file contents from generating until you try and upload or send them, but we do need to be able to send that virus.exe file around in order for we send it to Carol. Now Carol's access, we want to be able to send that to other people, obviously, to get to like David. So he wants a file. We're gonna give him super mega gossip. Oh, did I ruin everything? I may have. We did. Yep. Well, that's as far as we can get anyway because we're not we don't actually have the virus to send around. So at the top of the list, we want to create empty file systems for all employees so we can add virus.exe files to them when infecting them, and then create the rest of the file system when they are infected. So we can send files to them before infecting them, and then create the rest of the file system when they are infected. So that'll let us send like whatever we want to David. Like we could send him motivational quotes. He would have it on his file system later, even if he doesn't necessarily have the generated file system now. I think that's better than generating file systems for everyone because, I mean, with dozens or hundreds of people, that's just saving on dozens or hundreds of generations that we don't have to do if you're never gonna switch to their computer. But cool. We've got a list of 5 things to do to kind of wrap things up. We will add a start screen, but that we'll say add a start screen and link to the cutscene, the intro cutscene, instead of directly to the remote view. This should be all that's left before the game quote unquote goes gold, has all the features to be able to play. And from there, it's just like bug fixes and data entry and stuff. Obviously, there's a lot more features we could add. Lots of fun stuff you can do, like um, maybe if you're on somebody's computer and they're online, they open up a notepad and start typing to you or something, and it's like they're moving around windows and closing stuff, and you see their mouse move around and stuff like that would be kind of cool. Um, but probably by this time next week, I'll have this up on itch.io, and you all can play it. You can give me some feedback. Um, we're building this with Chroma Golem. This is me and another Andrew. I'm also Andrew. There's two of us working on AI in games to build kind of these interesting generative experiences, working through really fast, like working methodologies so we can kind of build out this system instead of um, building every aspect of the game. So obviously, I've built uh, the employees manually here, but it wouldn't be too hard to generate that whole organization web uh, from some code, and then for each employee generate their personality, and from their personality generate their contacts and files and stuff like that. So it could all be like end-to-end generative, and you can have kind of that roguelike experience from the get-go. Um, and we're just kind of leaning on AI where we can. This is kind of new technology, so we want to see what's fun, what's not, see what's possible and what's still not possible. Um, Walking that line of like, this game probably wouldn't have been possible before GPT-4 or 3.5, but like 5 years ago, definitely not. And I think it's kind of fun. So like social, obviously hacking games have been done. They're very technical, but social engineering games really haven't. And that like conversational aspect is really cool. But that's all to say, uh, Chroma Golem, we stream every week. I stream on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific time. Um, I'm usually doing game dev. Um, I might do some game streams sometime soon. The other Andrew might also do some streams come sometime soon. So join our Discord if you want to follow us. You can also follow us on Discord, Twitter, anywhere. We're Chroma Golem everywhere. So we are building these cool demos. If you want to play them, join that Discord, and we'll send you the link when it's ready. If you want to just talk game dev, if you're a game dev trying to figure stuff out or like make your own demos, come join us. We got a whole Discord full of developers who are making cool stuff. Yeah, Discord links in the description below. So I will see you guys next week as soon as I find my OBS window. Yeah, see ya. Thanks for joining me.